Hello and welcome to the Revenue Marketing Report powered by Caliber Mind. I'm your host, Camela Thompson, and today I'm thrilled to be joined by Amy Vosko. Amy, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi, how are you? It's good to chat with you again. I am a pretty seasoned revenue marketer at this point. I've been doing both sales and marketing conversations and alignment for, almost 30 years now. What I mean by that is I have been heavily focused on aligning sales and marketing teams and go-to-marketing team structures for my entire career. I've been heavily focused on building really good demand ABM structures, looking at pipeline, looking at retention. What do they mean together? So that way teams are focused on not just building pipeline, but building content and messaging that is aligned to making sure there's continuity as marketing teams go out to find the right audiences and making sure their teams understand why they're picking those audiences, validating which accounts they should be focusing on first, and making sure that they're focused on those and staying focused on the right accounts and making sure that their messages are really impactful and resonating, but also having a little fun along the way so that there's not necessarily, this boring structure. And that doesn't matter what industry that you're in. I really tend to geek out about it because there's a lot of analytical thinking that needs to go into it, but there's also a lot of misunderstanding, I think, between the two teams. The DNAs are very, very different, but that doesn't mean that you can't align and that you can't coordinate. And, right now I'm doing fractional work because I think that it can get really difficult in this economy for companies to kind of have a really good understanding of where their gaps are. And I like to kind of come in and figure out how to fill those gaps and make sure that they're doing it efficiently and effectively. And I too am having some fun with it. So I want to chat about leadership. I want to chat about the differences in these teams and how we can kind of, broaden some horizons and have some aha moments. So thank you for having me.
I'm so excited. And you started in sales, right? Like early?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
much to my own surprise. I wasn't expecting to be a salesperson, but I was young and I needed some extra money. And you know what? I actually really loved it. So yeah, I was a salesperson for about 5 years. I was a good salesperson, but I ended up moving into marketing because I had that creative drive as well. So
I love that so much. I
yeah.
ended up marrying a salesperson. And I've done a bit of sales engineering as the resident geek. So,
Yeah.
there's a lot of selling in that too.
Yeah.
So having both perspectives of loving the creative and the marketing and the sales, but also seeing how vastly different the personalities need to be,
Yeah.
really eye-opening. We will be touching on alignment throughout this, but we are going to be talking together about managing up, managing in, and managing out. So
Yeah.
today's topic is managing up. And I would love to start with, we're going to be talking about from an in-house perspective,
Mhm.
but managing up could mean CEO, could mean board,
Yeah.
and it could also mean you're an individual contributor and trying to help align executives. So, where would you like to start?
It's a good question. I actually want to start as an individual contributor
Love it.
because I think that I didn't really have an understanding about how do I want to describe it? It wasn't until I was a leader that I really truly understood that your world as an individual contributor is very blindsided.
Same.
You don't really understand the difficulties that a leader has. And so I think that there's a lot of misjudgment about your leaders.
Mhm.
Yeah, I see you shaking your head a lot, right? And so I
Yeah.
want to debunk some of those myths. So here's some of the secrets, folks, right? I think a lot of leaders get a bad rap.
Mhm.
They don't care. They're making decisions that are not in my interests. They don't think about me. They're crossing boundaries, all these bad raps that you're giving your leaders. And I'm going to give you some secrets. That's not necessarily always the case. It's really hard to be a leader. And sometimes as a leader, you have to make really hard decisions and you have to unfortunately think what's going to be best for the business. And that unfortunately doesn't always equate out to your people on your team or other teams. And Camilla, I think just looking at your head, you're agreeing with me, right?
Absolutely.
That's the hard part about being a leader. And I've been told many times as a leader, commiserating with other peers who are also leaders, or even commiserating with leaders who are above me, well, welcome to leadership, right?
Yeah.
This is the hard part. And I think it is a bit of a sacrifice that you end up making, because being a leader isn't always as shiny as you think it's going to be. I do love leadership. Don't get me wrong. I think that there's a lot of validation, but there's also a lot of opportunity that comes with it. And I think mentoring, which is one of my favorite parts about leadership, is one of those positives. But as an individual contributor, you're managing up is what you can do really well to manage up as an individual contributor is start to think about and change your mindset and try to put yourself in your manager's shoes.
Yes.
And I think that when you can start to try to pivot and think about what might be happening, with your manager, you're going to probably connect a lot better with your manager. And I'll give you one hopefully simple example. And the folks who I've worked with really well get this instinctually. Your leader or your manager has a lot going on, especially if they have a very large team. It is literally, and hopefully you take this as a positive, not as a negative, but it can be sometimes like herding cats, because now all of a sudden you're managing multiple people and all of the different projects that they've got going on, and you're managing up yourself, which means you're now also herding cats up. And so you're sort of in the middle and now having multiple lanes of things that you're trying to keep track of, even with the best management tools that you might even have. And that's a lot to remember on top of whatever personal stuff you have going on. And so catching your manager up on a regular basis with what you've got going on, keeping it simple, not expecting them to hold your hand on things that are happening, crossing your T's and dotting your I's, and remembering that your manager cannot remember every single thing goes a really long way. And I think that the folks who remember that and don't expect your manager to babysit you is a really super helpful thing. And that's how you can manage up a little bit. Because if I have to babysit you and I have to chase you for information, that just makes my job that much harder. And collaborating with me, bringing me solutions, not just coming and complaining. It's okay to talk to me about things that aren't working, but coming to me and telling me about things that aren't working, but then also coming to me and saying, hey, but I'm thinking this might be an opportunity of what we could do here. Even if it's not going to maybe work out in the end, that's okay. But I think even having a thought or a point of view about what could work is at least a chance for us to have a dialogue about it. And those are really great ways as an individual contributor to at least start the conversation. I don't know, I'm curious if you have any thoughts about that, but
Mostly amen and yes. I never thought I would quote Harry Truman, but here I am.
yeah,
I think he said, it's amazing what you can accomplish when no one is worried about getting credit.
yeah,
And I
yeah.
feel like one of the things I had to learn over time is the more I could tie what needed to and focus on what needed to be done for the company as opposed to what I needed to get done personally,
Mhm.
the better those conversations went.
Yeah.
And the better my focus was as an individual contributor. So the more you can align what you're doing day to day with what the business is trying to get done,
Mhm.
naturally you're just going to get along a lot better with your
Yeah,
leader.
absolutely.
The other piece that really resonated with me is the lack of time we have, and it's not a matter of not liking the person, not wanting to see that person succeed, but the lack of time we have and the need we have for people to align with our priorities.
Yeah.
So important. I think
Yeah.
that's where, if I have a sticking point with somebody who reports to me, it's on that lack of alignment.
Yeah.
I need to know that you're doing what needs the thing that absolutely needs to be done for the business. And if you're
Yeah.
going out on left field,
Come on, guys. Like we got
yeah,
this is not personal. It's genuinely not personal, right? And I think for me, I think back to my days as an individual contributor and transparently, I have my own days where it's like, oh my God, it's me. It's not you. Like this isn't about you.
yeah,
There's business to run. Everyone has business to run, and it's just we have stuff to do, folks, and I'm really feel badly if you're not feeling well today, but let me know, communicate. Let's just communicate, right? And then so I can figure it out. And I think that's the most important part about management, from that perspective. Some bosses, I think, who just genuinely do have a more abrasive side than others, that's,
sure.
you can't fix that. You're not going to. It was there before you got there, and it's going to be there after you got there, and you got to know that. And that's just a choice we make.
Yeah, I mean, an interview needs to be a two-way street, and you need to understand the person you're reporting to, whether or not you're going to mesh well. And it's hard to do in 30 minutes or an hour, however long you have. I get that. It's important to start to learn. It's like dating, right? This is horrible, but it just is. Like, you need to learn what you
Absolutely.
can live with and what you can't live with is really what this is about.
Exactly. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. You had more to the question, I feel like. Did I answer it all, or?
If we could for just a second, there was one thing that really jumped out to me as somebody in revenue operations, and a constant frustration for me was a lack of ability to invest in long term and a focus on short term. And when I moved to marketing leadership, it was very eye-opening. And that's why I work so closely with so many people in operations and want to have this conversation is sometimes we have to focus on the short term to ensure we have jobs and can invest in the long term. Would you like to build on that at all?
Yeah, I feel like lately that's getting a little harder and harder. And I do feel like it's a bit of just a change of the times. And I'm curious myself from a generational perspective, all generations, not just my generation or the younger generations, like how people feel about that. How do you work to focus on the short term and manage up,
Mhm.
but then also build for the long term? I don't have an answer for that, unfortunately, because I am curious about that myself. But what I can say, I think, is keep asking questions
Mhm.
and try to think about your questions and your curiosity with a bit of a balance and a bit of a tact, um, around where your company is going and where your leadership, all leadership, whether you're an individual contributor or your middle management. And I think even if you're an executive and talking to your board, where do we feel like we're heading over the next 24 months? Where do we feel like we're heading in the right direction, and keep being curious about that. And I think that is potentially a good way to not only keep yourself grounded, but also focused. And it's a way of managing, right? It's a way of managing yourself, and it's a way of continuing to manage alongside your leadership. And it also likely positions yourself as someone who's invested in the business that you're in. So it's a very big mixed, it's almost like a salad dressing, I would say, because it's not a bowl, it's a salad dressing of self-checking. Is the work that I'm doing right now the right work to be doing, the right focus of what I'm doing? I think marketing especially gets asked a lot to pivot constantly on what they're doing. I will have had many, 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 many scenarios where where my team is working on programs that gets abrupted, stopped mid-program, mid-plan, mid-strategy, mid-execution because somebody read an article, we got a last-minute opportunity because, pipeline, a campaign, a program got stopped. I think it's okay to be curious and ask executives, ask a board, how does this translate to the goals of what we're trying to get to, right?
I think it's really also okay to pause and check in because like I don't mind being interrupted if you're asking me whether or not something aligns or if there's something else that's more urgent. Please
Yeah,
do. Like
yeah,
if it's really a big question, please do.
yeah. And I think that, I'm saying this because the concept of managing up, I think immediately, my thoughts are always, it's a feeling of confrontation, but it doesn't have to be. I think it's just,
No.
it can be shifted in mindset around just a curiosity. I want to learn. I want to grow. I want to make sure that I'm doing what's right for the business. I want to understand in order for me to help this business grow or continue to grow, I need to make sure that I'm staying focused on the right things. Um, and I also think that sometimes, oh, by the way, this gets back to the individual contributor and secrets. Um, Leadership doesn't always know either.
Yeah,
Uh, and
100%.
having that collaboration, we have all heard stories of hallway conversations where someone who isn't necessarily at the top of the food chain having an idea. And that's where good collaboration happens. I think that's why so many people have enjoyed working at startup organizations because there is that cross-pollination.
Yes.
Um, Folks who work at 10,000 person companies don't always get that, and that's okay. Um, so it can be a scary concept, I think, of managing up, and I haven't always done it myself perfect, but um, just try to put yourself in the other person's shoes, I think is the quick statement, and try to have some curiosity to give yourself that permission to ask questions and get some direction. When it comes to, I think, board conversations, when you're presenting, think of it from their perspective. They've invested a lot of time and money. And when you're developing your narrative of what's working and what's not working in your organization, that's what you need to be leaning with in terms of reporting on performance or lack of performance, and then have some curiosity built in
Yes.
to yeah, that. So
Yeah, I mean, we want to acknowledge the results, but ultimately we're talking about what worked, what didn't work, and what we're going to do differently to improve that. And that's what they really want to know. Are you being a good steward of the budget you're being given? Um, but I wanted to go back just a little bit and talk about as an executive or somebody who wants to move into that position, the dynamic you need to have with your CEO, because a lot of us, especially in tech, we're working with people who are coming from a very technology-based background or they've been in sales. So the outlook is very different and it takes a ton of communication. So I love your point that managing up doesn't need to be confrontational. It's usually not.
yeah.
It's usually developing a communication cadence and figuring those things out. Could we talk just a little bit about that?
Sure. Yeah, for me, it's been really interesting. I've been in tech startups now for a little over, gosh, probably a little over 11 years now. And so I've been able to have a very close connection to the CEO. And every one of them have been different
Mhm.
personalities. But I think what's remained consistent is there's been a bit of, they're very, very close to keeping an eye on trends in the marketplace, trends on what other companies are doing, other founders are doing. CEOs read a lot,
Mhm.
a lot. I don't know how and when they have time to read as much because I do not. I also realize that they do not, especially if you're a marketer, by the way. I know not everyone watching this is a marketer, but they tend to not be as knowledgeable in the marketing space. So I think this is your opportunity to really help educate them and help them understand what they need to be focused on. So this isn't time for you to pull up the 101s unless they're curious about that, but really get to the point on what you're there to do to help deliver the company what they need, and focus on that first, but then also deliver whatever education that they're looking for. But you're there to also be, I think, the steward, the conciliary. I don't know if I'm saying that correctly, right? But you're there to help them with trends. You're there to also guide them and wear a lot of different hats. And so it doesn't have to be scary. There could be a relationship that is developed very, very quickly.
Mhm.
You need to get to know them, give them that guidance for sure, not to step on toes because, they're a leader for a reason, for sure. But wear a revenue hat at the end of the day. This is not necessarily, they may be very interested in building the brand, but always make sure you've got revenue in the back pocket, because guess what? The board is very interested in revenue at the end of the day. So
Yeah.
I guess
Yeah.
what I'm trying to say here is there's a lot of hats you're going to need to wear, but these are things that I find are consistent with every CEO that I've worked with at tech startups.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting because I feel like in the larger companies, you're probably getting someone who has a lot more experience. They're not a first-time founder CEO. They have been at multiple companies. They've seen what works at those companies. And that tends to come with a slightly different flavor of struggle because, as we know in marketing, what works changes so often.
Yeah.
Have you found any way to, there's no hacks. I understand that. But is there a communication strategy you use to show which trends have changed, maybe?
So this is an interesting topic. I think if you're at a startup, especially, and this is my personal opinion, and I'm saying it because of my experience, it's very easy to go in and show those trends, but I personally go in to take a look at what that company needs. Because you could walk into a startup and they may be at a certain point in their trajectory and they have a really good brand awareness scenario. So they've got a lot of hand raisers. I'll give you an example. I was at one startup. They had zero problem with getting leads. We
That's
were
great.
we were drowning in leads. So brand awareness was not the issue. They needed to corral everything internally and start to scale everything. So, for us, it wasn't about brand awareness or anything like that. We needed to kind of get to the next level in terms of how do we get all of this internally and start to build out the partnerships, build out all of those other things. And so I wouldn't need to go in there and start giving them the trend analysis on that piece, right? I've been at other startups where they didn't have any of that in place.
Yep.
And so, so I guess my point is going in and having a backpack full of, all right, here's the trend analysis, and this is where the marketplace is going, can work. But if this particular company, no one even knows who they are, then we need to examine and meet you where you are.
Yep.
I've been at other startups where they're like, we want to do ABM.
Mm-hmm.
ABM is not going to work for you right now. The
Yep.
reason is that you don't even have leads coming in right now.
You
You
need
don't
the infrastructure too. Like,
grow
you don't.
infrastructure.
Mhm.
You're not even clear yet who your ideal customer profile is. An
Bingo.
right, an ABM program is something that is meant to take, a while to build, very deep strategy, create a very, it's meant to take a while and kind of create, influence and engagement over time. I love ABM, believe me, but that is
Mhm.
something that's going to take a bit of time to grow. You don't have that kind of runway. You need to kind of get moving and start to blend that as you go. So I guess my point is that a strong marketing strategy needs to meet you where you are and have a good blend of recommendation based on what you need.
Sometimes feelings and what we know worked in the past as a CEO or anybody, any human, we get an attachment.
Yeah.
And sometimes the emotions outweigh the rationality and the numbers. So putting guardrails and saying, we'll try this, but if we see this and this change, we need to go differently. Can be helpful. Amy, thank you so much. Tomorrow we're going to be talking about managing in and out. Listeners, thank you so much for tuning in to the Revenue Marketing Report. Please tell 2 friends, subscribe, download, whatever you can helps. And for those of you looking for more great content like this, check out calibermind.com.